Should Commanders fans really expect a big improvement from the offense now that Eric Bieniemy is here? We hear from inside the organization to find that out and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up and welcome into the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, so please subscribe or follow on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts for free so you always get the latest episodes when they drop. I'm David Harrison, credentialed member of the media covering your Washington Commanders for Commander Country, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation. You can find me there, here, or on Twitter at dharrison82, or you can text me anytime via Subtext at 202-760-2644. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the view today and every day. This episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the National Football League. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. Joined now on the Locked On Commanders podcast by Zach Selby, senior writer for the Washington Commanders, on Twitter at ZachSelbyWC. Zach, we've seen each other more recently than you've been on the show, but the last time we saw each other was Eric Bieniemy's introductory press conference. That obviously was a little while ago, but since we're getting you on the record now here shortly before the NFL draft, so there's been some time to kind of adjust and maybe kind of get a lay of the land, especially the feel inside the building. What are your thoughts following the hiring and the arrival of Eric Bieniemy?
Well, I think whenever the news first happened, and then, I guess even like the buildup, we're like, okay, this might actually happen. This might actually go down. And then when the news finally broke that we were going to hire him, it was like an explosion. I mean, there was so much excitement going, like just buzzing around the building. And I wouldn't say it's like gone down or anything, but it's just more like, okay, he's here, he's doing his thing. He's getting this offense ready to go. I've obviously you hear about Bieniemy and how impressive he is, just as an offensive coordinator and doing all of his things. But getting to know him a little bit, like as a person, it makes me even more excited for him. I got a chance to talk to him for about 30 minutes after he had his introductory press conference, and I asked him a lot of questions about like how he views, his philosophies on coaching, who he looks up to, why the details matter so much, and it just shows you why he is the way he is. His dedication to the craft is unlike most coaches that are around right now. And right now he's meeting with the coaches, as other coaches, around 7:30, 8 o'clock every morning, to just kind of get them acclimated to the offense and what he expects out of his players. And I was talking to Vita Pritchard last week, and he was telling me, I asked him like, what are some of the things that he's really like preaching, and details was the big thing. And that doesn't surprise me at all, considering how much he preached on how big these minor details are for himself and how he likes to run his offenses, because those little details can end up being, a block that ends up busting loose a 20-yard play, or it could end up being a loss. Like those things really matter a lot to him, and he's just so consistent. And I cannot wait to see what he's able to do. And we're going to get a first look at that at OTAs, and I guess even before that, probably the rookie minicamp in May. Yeah. But I'm really excited to see what this offense is going to look like with Bieniemy at the helm, because I think he has a lot of tools to do some real damage.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be exciting. Honestly, I obviously can't wait just to get back to football just in general, but specifically to see kind of how this differs from what we saw last year specifically. And speaking of last year, a lot of Commanders fans really expecting, like we haven't seen anything just quite yet. So a lot of this is kind of gut feeling and reactions. And like you said, getting to know him, you kind of have a better feel of really kind of what the tone might be. Yep. But a lot of fans are expecting a much better offensive strategy, even if, the play of Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett and that battle still has to play itself out, but they're expecting at least, I would say, more of agreeable type of approach to the offense, I think is the best way to put it.
And, I was asking Pritchard a little bit about, what he likes about the West Coast system, and he gave a really fantastic answer. I can't wait for the rest of the media to talk to him, because he's a really smart guy. He was basically like, Bill Washington invented the West Coast offense to get the most out of players regardless of what their scheme fits are. Like, so for example, he gave a really good example of we have McCaffrey and we have Toby Gerhart, two completely different running backs who both succeeded a lot in that system because of how they're able to highlight their talents. And I think that's something that the West Coast does really well. Obviously, there's an emphasis on getting the ball out a lot quicker. And I think, the receivers are, especially with receivers like Terry, Jahan, Curtis, all players who can create separations quickly at the line of scrimmage. I think that's going to fit right into their wheelhouse. And I think he's going to be able to highlight the skills of Brian Robinson. I think he's going to be able to do that for Tony Gibson. I think he's going to be able to make sure that everyone is doing the best they can in what they do well and put them in the best position to succeed with their own talent. So I really think it's like I said, I think it's really going to help out. And I really think that this offense, I don't think it has to be, obviously it's not going to be as good as the Kansas City Chiefs were. They're not going to go from mid-20s to 1 in 1 year. But I think 12 is possible if Bieniemy can get the right pieces to do what he wants them to do. But even then, like, all this offense needs to do is just find ways to score points in the red zone, which is, of course, I know is a big deal. But if they can just average, 5 more points a game, think about what that would have been able to do last year. Like, I mean, they would have won 2 more games. They would have been in the playoffs, and we'd have been having a very different conversation about this team last year. So I get, people want the dramatic turnaround, but I think somewhere more in the middle is closer to what you can expect. But even then, I think that is going to be a noticeable turnaround from what we had last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to make a lot of fans happy here. Guys being used to their strength. You talk about Tavita Pritchard, new quarterback coach there for the Washington Commanders. Let's expand a little bit more on that. Sam Howell coming into his second year. Now he's going to have, a new direct position coach kind of mentoring him. You've gotten to know Sam. You kind of know where he came through last year and kind of how he was brought up his first year in the NFL. How do you think Coach Pritchard is going to take that to the next level?
Well, honestly, Pritchard had a lot of really good things to say about Sam Howell. He had all the arm talent in the world, can make all the throws. And his, one thing that really stuck out to him whenever he was talking to Sam was how, and even people who around the building who've got to know Sam over the past year, is how competitive he is. And I think that's really going to matter because I think he has a lot of the talent that you really want to see. Because he was my favorite quarterback coming out of the draft last year. I think he's going to really excel in this system. And I think, the arm talent, right? He can throw 50 yards with ease. But I think, one thing that really stuck out to me, and it was on his first throw, is how quickly he gets the ball out of his hands when he really needs to. And I think that's going to fit right in with the West Coast system about trying to get the ball quickly to playmakers. And he has this really nice release that it stuck out to me very quickly. I was like, oh my gosh, like that's not something that we saw with Carson Wentz or even Taylor Heineke. It was like he just zinged it out there to Terry McLaurin, and of course Terry did the rest. So, and I think that play right there, even though it was a different scheme, different philosophy, like I think that's going to be closer to what you see out of this offense. You're going to get the ball to Terry in space, which is something that I'm sure the fans are really going to want to see a lot more of, and it's going to let him to get yards out of the catch and make plays and be a top 10 receiver that he is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, going back to your comments about Eric Bieniemy, right? The concept of accentuating players' strengths is going to help every single player across the board here. The new additions are just beginning as a new group of rookies are about to get their NFL start in Washington. Who is Zach targeting for the Washington Commanders? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're going to do this thanks to our friends over at Built Bar. If you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, I've got just the thing for you. Built Bars and Built Puffs. Seriously, they taste so amazing, you won't even think they're good for you. You got to try this. What makes Built Bars so good is that they're all covered in 100% real dark chocolate, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. These bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar while packing a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't even have to wait to get a box. For years, we've been telling you to go to Built.com to get your Built Bars, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club while getting your specialty flavors still at Built.com. At Built.com, you can get all new flavors like cookies and cream puff. That just sounds amazing. Or you can head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a four-bar box of the cookies and cream bar, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. If you're close to a Sam's Club, run in there and grab a 13-bar box packed with hit flavors like brownie batter puff and churro puff. Built Bar, you got to try this. Thanks again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen or your first view of the day. Now, back to my conversation with senior writer for the Washington Commanders, Zach Selby. Zach Selby, senior writer for Washington Commanders, and on Twitter at Zach Selby WC, joining us here today on the Locked On Commanders podcast. Zach, let's switch now. A lot of exciting things going on in the coach staff. We didn't even get to talk about all the coaching changes because there's been some things coming in. A new coaching change is going to happen eventually, right? Because we still need an offensive line coach. I'm sure that decision will be made sooner rather than later. But the NFL draft is what everybody is looking forward to here in the next couple of weeks. So let's do it this way. So I have kind of my top 3 draft, I think, needs for the Washington Commanders. And a lot of people get convoluted talking about this because it doesn't necessarily mean we're going round 1 there, round 2 there, round 3 there, just because that's the top 3. But I think offensive line, you still have to, continue building the offensive line. I like what they've done so far. We can talk about some of the new additions there. But then I also think the defensive back group, and that's kind of an on-the-fence way of saying that because I'm not really specifying safety, nickel, perimeter. I want to get your thoughts on Benjamin St-Juste. Is he staying outside or moving inside if you have control? And then the tight end group. Not because I don't like the tight end group in Washington. We talked a lot about it during the season. It's a very good tight end room. But I think this class is so good that you can't ignore it in the NFL draft.
So I'll start with Benjamin St-Juste. And I think, yes, it's great that he was able to play nickel. I think it was great that he has, the size and the quickness to match up against any kind of slot receiver that they have out there. But when they moved him outside, it was different. And he definitely that was definitely his natural position, and you felt it. Like from the moment he bumped out there again. He was going. I know we've talked about this a lot, but he was going up against Justin Jefferson. He was going up against people like Brandon Cooks, who doesn't get a whole lot of pub, but he's a very good receiver. He's a quality guy. I think he can hold his own against those guys, and he has the length and the size to do it. Now, I know his first year he had a little bit of some issues in that area too, but you have to remember, the Eagles, with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, he held his own against those guys. He has a lot of ability, and if it were me, I'm letting him just stay out there outside and just let him grow into a number 1 corner, somewhere down the line. Because Kendall Fuller is not going to play on this team forever, and St-Juste is younger. So hopefully, you think by the time Kendall moves on for whatever reason, St-Juste is right there to say, okay, I'm the number 1 corner, I'm ready to go. Because he basically was last year in a lot of ways. So I'll keep it at that. So I hear you on tight end, and I hear you, that the fact the class is, by all accounts, one of the best tight end groups that we've seen maybe in a decade. It's that deep. But I think here's the problem with that is that, and I'm not saying that they won't address tight end, because I think they could potentially bring in some other guy there at some point, but you do come into, I guess, kind of a good problem of who you're going to get rid of, because you already have 5 on the roster. You've got Logan Thomas, who they really like, and they feel like if he's healthy and he gets a full offseason under him to get ready, he's going to be that guy. He's still the all-around tight end that they thought he was, a couple of years ago. You have John Bates, who is, by my accounts, one of, if not the best blocking tight ends in the league. He was in terms of rookies, 2 years ago, he was the best blocking tight end out there in terms of his rookie class. I think he's still one of the best this year, and he has really good underrated hands for his position. And you got Cole Turner, who I guess people don't necessarily forget, but in training camp and in OTAs, he was I was really excited about him because of how awesome he was in the red zone. He was making plays left and right. And it was really unfortunate that he tweaked his hamstring, because if he hadn't done that, I think he would have been in a more immediate impactor for this offense. Who knows what would have happened there? And I think, they also have Armani Rodgers that they really like. They have Curtis Hodges, who's more of a project, but he also made some really good plays in training camp as well. So I think, while it's never a problem to have enough, like you never want to say, oh, right, we're good on talent. Like we're not going to, we're not going to, we're going to stop getting talent. But I do think you're in a tough position where, like, all right, we've already got 5 guys we really like. Do we want to add another one and make a tough decision for us and have to get rid of another one of those guys? Like, I don't know. I think it's possible for sure. They draft it maybe like in the 3rd round because I think there are still some quality tight ends that can be found in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
But I think like Dalton Kincaid, like I don't know if Mayer. I don't know if they'll go for that because I think corner. I think off the line are more needs for them immediately than tight end is because I think those 5 give them a lot of flexibility in that area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Day 2 is kind of where, Dalton Kincaid is my favorite guy, but I think when you look at,
he's great. Not Walker, but he's really good. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think you're right though. Like when you look at the group, is it a luxury pick? It's absolutely a luxury pick. But what I'm hoping. So my Wednesday episode of Locked On Commanders had a question from a listener and basically turned that question into a mock trade. And obviously the Jacksonville Jaguars would have to be willing to deal as well. But I was able to nab the Commanders a pick somewhere between 47 and 97. I think that sweet spot, if you can add a pick, maybe that's where you can feel like you can spend that luxury. But it'll be interesting to see what the Commanders do. So if you think that Benjamin St-Juste is better off staying outside, that's what I've been saying all offseason. I think more Commanders fans agree with that. At least my listeners and viewers agree with that than disagree with it. So that kind of brings up a conversation. Joey Porter Jr., a very popular prospect, first-round cornerback prospect, versus a guy like Deonte Banks. So Joey Porter Jr., my assessment, very strong man cover guy, very physical press corner type, struggled a little bit of Penn State in zone coverage. That worries me. But honestly, and I'll be honest with you, it worries me because of William Jackson. And that's not fair to Joey Porter Jr. Deonte Banks, more of a slot guy, but he was a day 2 prospect till about a month ago. Now suddenly he's a fast riser day 1. Has anything really changed, or is it just kind of the need of the position elevating him? What do you think about the contrast between those 2 guys specifically? And do you have a favorite corner yourself if you were, telling Ron Rivera, Martin Mayhew, and the brain trust what to do?
Well, my favorite cornerback pretty much from the start of my draft work has been Christian Gonzalez because I think he's an all-around guy who is – I think if he were able to come here, he would make an immediate impact, like just day 1, but he's not going to be there. He's probably going to be a top 10 pick. So as unfortunate as that is, like, them's the breaks, as they say. Yeah. But Joey Porter Jr. versus Deonte Banks. And I first started looking at Joey Porter, and I think there's a lot to like, for sure. I think he's got, like length out of his mind. Like he's one of the gotta be like the longest corner in the entire draft class. His arms kind of just go all the way down to his kneecaps. And he's very good in man coverage. I think his footwork at the line of scrimmage can be improved on. There are some times when he's kind of almost like he's taking a step forward, like at the line of scrimmage against like in man matches before he, gets out there and covers the receivers. And I think, in that situation, I'm worried about how he would do against exceptional route runners. So in a hypothetical situation, Terry versus Joey Porter Jr. Joey Porter has the length, but Terry is one of the best route runners we have, like playing now. So I wonder if his footwork is not right, is Terry just going to take advantage of that and just burn him? So and there are other greater there's other great route runners out there in the league that he's going to have to go up against, whether he plays in the slot or not. So I wonder about that. Now I think something I do enjoy about Deonte Banks is that he is a very sticky corner. He can play really close to his receivers without getting too handsy, which is a problem that Joey Porter has. I think he knows how to track the ball. He knows how to, make the jumps at the right time. And he's really fast. He plays really fast. He has enough physicality. He can fight through blocks to make plays in the screen game. He does a lot of things I really enjoy. And if it were me, I think I would probably take Deonte Banks over Joey Porter Jr. But again, I think, this team, especially Jack Del Rio, does a very good job of trying to fit players, where he knows they could succeed. And I think, if they do draft Joey Porter Jr., I think they could probably find a place for him where he can use his man coverage skills and use his length to his advantage. But I mean, Deonte Banks, I think, sticks out to me just a little more because of what he can do in the run game and how he doesn't have to, necessarily draw contact to make plays.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I like everything that you just said there. And I think we kind of agree. Like Joey Porter Jr. to vacuum, very exciting prospect. You know what I mean? And you would hope that if he lands with the team, the coaching staff. And I mean, that's an angle I haven't really thought of. I mean, going up against, if I'm the DB coach, you're going up against Terry rep 1, you're going up against Curtis rep 2, and then you're going up against Jahan rep 3, because we're just going to give you an exposure to pretty much everything you can deal with on an NFL field. And we're going to teach you baptism by fire. So another position group, not getting a lot of talk here leading up to the NFL draft, but I think it is a position group that I expect the Commanders to address in the draft at some point. I don't know if I want to sit here and stand on the table and say it needs to be a day 2 or early day 3 even, but I think at some point in time they're going to add a running back, because I think you look at Brian Robinson, you look at Antonio Gibson, Jonathan Williams is back. I don't believe, unless I miss it, that Jarrett Patterson's officially back, but I don't imagine that would probably be an issue. But I still think you need at least some competition maybe for that number 3 if Jonathan Williams isn't going to be that guy. How do you feel about the running back room? Do you have kind of a target window where you think that they might be able to go? And then same question about the other positions, do you have a favorite back in this class?
Well, I mean, favorite. Favorite. I think everyone knows who everyone's favorite is. That'd be John Robinson. But
yeah.
No, we'll get to my favorites in a minute. But I do think that yes, they could probably do with another running back. I think I think this class you can find a lot of really running backs later on in the draft. But I think I also think they're in a position where if the right guy doesn't fall to them, I think they would be okay with rolling with Jonathan Williams, Brian Robinson, and Antonio Gibson, because I mean Jonathan Williams didn't play that much, but he did have some pretty good moments whenever he was out there. And I think there are also, a couple of other options in free agency too. Like if the right guy, like I said, if the right guy doesn't fall to them in the draft, they could bring in an interesting player, to be a third option in that running back room and not take up a whole crazy amount of salary cap space. But I think Spears is the guy that obviously everyone is kind of starting. He's like a day 3 guy that everyone's kind of like just starting to fall in love with. I understand why he's stood out just a lot. I was looking at some 6th round potential picks today, and there's this guy named Evan Hull that I think could be very interesting, and he's a downhill guy. He's very physical. He knows how to move. He knows how to create holes when there isn't any. And I think that's really interesting. He's also a pretty solid pass catcher. I think he had about 520-ish yards as a pass catcher. He knows how to do a little bit of everything. And I think you could probably bring in maybe Hull to do more of like a change of pace sort of thing whenever you need to give Brian Robinson a spell or two. So if you need a third down bag, maybe he comes in there, does it. But I think he's a guy that I'm going to keep my eye on, to kind of watch a little more film on. But I definitely do think they could bring in, whether it's to draft free agency. I think it would be nice to bring in a third back there. But again, they're kind of awarded the luxury of, since they have Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. I don't necessarily think it's not a pressing need, but it's more of like an ancillary need, I guess, if you want to put it that way.
All right, I tried to make a Mac Jones trade option make sense. Some of you saw the genius behind the crazy, while some of you, well, you just didn't. What does Zach think of that? And more rumors surrounding the Washington Commanders. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Senior writer for the Washington Commanders, Zach Selby, joining us here on the Locked On Commanders podcast. Find him on Twitter at Zach Selby WC. Zach, to wrap up this time here, appreciate you joining us, of course, as always. I had a couple episodes come out here this week about some topics. Okay. I got some people with some opinions brewing. Okay. The first one was about Mac Jones, the New England Patriots quarterback, and the basis of it. And I know you've been deep into getting to know the new coaches and what the Commanders might do in the draft and everything else. I don't even know how much traction it got inside the building, but the report that came out from Mike Florio at the New England Patriots have been shopping Mac Jones and the Commanders were one of the teams that they reportedly talked to. Now, that's the end of the report. Like, we're not even talking about confirmed trade talks, negotiations. The Commanders offered this, but the Patriots wanted that. It didn't even go that far. But I took it upon myself on the show to kind of dive a little bit deeper into what could have happened if that was the route, if the Commanders did show a little bit of interest. The first question I have to ask you is, to you, bringing in another potential young quarterback, Mac Jones, or even someone during the NFL draft, say in the first 3 rounds, do you think that would muddy the waters just a little too much with this pending competition coming up with Sam Howell, Jacoby Brissett? Or do you think more competition is always better competition? And then 2, if I could tell you, because this is where I lost some of the Locked On Commanders listeners, that we would probably fork over maybe a late day 2, early day 3 pick for Mac Jones, but we recoup that pick in a later draft trade. So essentially, you're only losing a day 3 pick is essentially what I end up giving up and not recouping. Would you be up for that?
So first of all, with the competition, I'm definitely not opposed to it. And I don't think this team is either. Because while Sam is going to get every chance to be the starter, he hasn't gotten it yet. And it doesn't seem, based on what Rivera said during the owners' meetings, it doesn't seem like he's completely ruling the possibility of getting a quarterback at some point in the draft, not necessarily with 16. He's not ruling adding another quarterback to that group. So I think that's probably a smart decision, because if you find somebody that you really love at quarterback and you want to see if you can give him a chance, take it, because you haven't named Sam Howell the starter yet, and he still needs to earn the job. And now that they would have to compete with Jacoby Brissett, who's also an accomplished player in his own right. So I think the fact that they brought in Jacoby, it tells you that they want competition, because Jacoby is he's probably he's the upper, the high end of what you would expect out of a backup fringe starter. Not even a fringe starter, legitimate starter in a lot of areas. He was a good player for the Browns last year. And in terms of Mac Jones, I think, of course anything can happen, but I just don't see the appeal of bringing in Mac Jones, because when I heard the reports that the Patriots might be shopping Mac Jones, I kind of looked at it and said, okay, what does Mac Jones give you that Sam Howell doesn't give you? And it doesn't really feel like there's you could probably say, okay, starting experience, sure. But I don't see in terms of talent, I'm not really sure if I see a whole lot of difference there. And they really, really like Sam. They want to see what he has. And plus that, you would bring in Sam, Jacoby, and Matt Jones, and plus you have to consider, if you're going to trade for Matt Jones, you're bringing on his rookie contract, and he's a first round pick. So that's going to give you less security in the salary, and with the salary cap, which is something that they find appealing about Sam Howell, because they can build around him. And then you have to consider whether or not you're going to exercise this 5th-year option and everything like that. So there are other things you have to consider with that as well. So I think risk versus reward, I just don't see the point to bring Mac Jones in. Now, like I said, anything could happen, but I think at this point you just need to roll with Sam and see where he takes you.
Yeah. So you mentioned an interesting thing about future quarterbacks potentially coming in. Hendon Hooker, the only quarterback that we know of as at least of right now that's going to visit the Washington Commanders specifically. Now, I take that more so as just being smart, due diligent. We saw what happened last year. A quarterback like Sam Howell fell to the 5th round. Didn't expect him to be there. Who knows where Hendon Hooker, that whole thing could surprise, and the NFL could surprise everybody by how much they let him slide as well. Do you take that as more just doing their homework, kind of getting the medicals on him there right before the draft, or do you think there's more there that you see than maybe people are giving credit to?
Well, of course the team does not release out the official 30 visits, so reports are reports. But I that being said, just generally talking about Hendon Hooker, by all accounts, he seems like he's just a standout guy. He's a great interview, great person to talk to. And I think a lot of teams are looking at him, just one, to check out the medicals, and I think two, I think there are some people who think he has some legitimate skills, and I think he could potentially be a pretty pretty competent player at the next level. Now, of course, the offense, Josh Heupel's offense is, it is what it is. Like he was thrown to a lot of open guys, and
Right.
that's not going to be the case in the NFL. He's going to have to read more defenses and more schemes than he did at Tennessee. Because last time I checked, there's no Vanderbilt. Don't mean to give a straight shot to Vanderbilt because I love Vanderbilt, but no, I think Hendon is a really solid player. He has like a pretty good arm, has some really good legs. I think he could be like a really good player at some point. But I think you have to remember about these 30 visits is, just because they're bringing someone in does not necessarily mean that they're going to draft these people, or even that like they have a lot of reasons why they're going to do these 30 visits. And people remember Jahan Dotson didn't get a 30 visit, and they talked to him once and they were like, "Yep, we're good. We want this guy.
Don't need any more."
Yeah, we know we like out of him. So I wouldn't look too much into it because I think a lot of teams are looking at a lot of different quarterback positions. Even not necessarily quarterback needy teams are looking at some of these quarterbacks. Like Anthony Richardson has gotten a lot of visits because of what he could potentially be and where he could fall. Because I know a lot of people think he could be a potential top 5 pick, but he's also in a position where he could slide. Like you never know. And if it's if he slides, I don't know, maybe like outside the top 10, like there's some team that be like, we could potentially get like another version of Josh Allen, like at that point. So yeah, we're gonna take a shot on him because he's an athletic freak and he could be really good for us. So like I said, I wouldn't put too much into it. But I do think the teams that are bringing Hendon Hooker want to check the medicals out and see if the personality and what he could do on film in his mind is worth enough for them to use a pick on him.
100%. Glad to hear you say that. And then final thing, Devin White, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, off-ball linebacker, electric personality, top 5 draft pick in 2019. He's requested a trade. The Buccaneers, the word out of the Buccaneers organization, again, not official statements or anything like that, but is that they're not interested in trading him. If they open the door to a possible trade, I think I know your answer, but what do you think about the potential of Devin White joining the Washington Commanders?
I don't think so. Just because I think if you look at what Rivera has not made a whole lot of trades, not trades like that. I think Kyle Allen is the one that comes to mind. He traded for Kyle Allen back in 2020, but I can't think of too many other trades he's done in his 3 years here. And I think Rivera's philosophy is always that we're going to develop the guys we have right now and the guys that we picked ourselves, as opposed to trading for somebody, because you have to consider, okay, for one, does the team want to trade with us? In this case, no. But for hypotheticals, let's say, okay, yes, the Buccaneers would like to trade with the Commanders. Then what's the trade value there? Are they going to come to agreement on that? And plus, does Devin White fit in this system? I know it's a need, but is it does need does not always necessarily equate to fit. You can't just plug anybody in there. So I think we'll see where that story develops. But if it were me, I would lean not on them going after Devin White and just kind of sticking with Cody Barton and a lot of and a draft pick maybe, or a lot of other players at depth pieces on their linebacking group.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I said on my episode reacting to the news. Some names, they get attention from pretty much everybody. But when you got an off-ball linebacker need, fans want to know about these guys. So you and I are on the same page. I definitely took a more Devin White approach to it. You took a Commander's approach to it. So I think the two meet in the middle and they're saying the same message. That's probably not a good fit for the Washington Commanders. So sorry to anybody, Commanders, LSU fans, you know what I mean? But Devin White will be around. You'll still be able to watch him on the football field. And you get to catch Zach Selby's work, doing a lot of great things. I saw you with Logan Paulson getting some camera time. But senior writer for the Washington Commanders, Twitter, Zach Selby WC. Zach, what do you got coming up for the Commanders fans?
So we actually me and Logan did something else the other day. We started talking about the tackles, and we looked specifically at Darnell Wright, looked at DeJuan Jones at Ohio State, We looked at Anton Harrison at Oklahoma, kind of comparing the three, seeing who they could potentially go with there if Washington does decide to go with the tackle at 16 or any other spot in their draft. But I'm just getting to pick Logan's brain is always a great thing because he's very knowledgeable. And as a former offensive lineman myself, I believe I brought a little bit more expertise to that discussion.
Yeah. Absolutely. Looking forward to that talking. And, every time I see Logan, we talk about, we got to get him on the show. And I'm a terrible person and just keep not making that happen. So I need to definitely reach out to him, have him on the show. But Zach, I appreciate you coming on with us here today. Look forward to seeing you soon. NFL draft weekend and then mini camps, OTAs. I mean, it's about to get started again.
Yeah, we're starting to churn up and get ready to go. I can't wait for it.
Big shout out to my buddy Zach Selby, senior writer for the Washington Commanders. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at Zach Selby WC. Make sure you're checking out everything he's doing for your Washington Commanders. A lot of media going out there from the Commanders these days. Make sure you're checking all of that out. I want to thank all of you for joining me and Zach here on Locked On Commanders, making this your first listen, your first view of the day. For your second, check out Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, from free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and more. Join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to build a successful NFL franchise every Monday through Friday. Find Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. I will be back to wrap up the week tomorrow. If you got questions, mock drafts, want to send those in, send them in via email, lockedoncommanders@gmail.com, or find me on Twitter at dharrison82, or drop them down in the YouTube comment box as well. And if you want to text me, get in on the subtext fund 202-760-2644. Signing off for today, I'm David Harrison, staff writer for Commander Country of Sports Illustrated's FanNation, credentialed member of the media covering your Washington Commanders, and more importantly, hanging out with you today and every day, 5 days a week. Till we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, and I'll see you next time right back here for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.